for accessing the Transcelerate Clinical Trial Diversification Better Practices information for clinical trial patient reimbursement and compensation. My name is Merriman Nasser, Digital Strategist for Product Development Patient Recruitment with Genentech. This will require approximately 15 minutes to review. Improve racial and ethnic diversity in clinical trial populations to better reflect targeted population subgroups. The Clinical Diversification Initiative recommends sponsors consider the use of patient reimbursement and/or compensation for clinical trial participants. It is recognized that this may have a disproportionately beneficial impact on recruitment and retention for those of lower socioeconomic status. Sponsors are increasing pressure to ensure clinical trial populations reflect the disease state. Regulators are increasing focus on ensuring trial populations are representative of the indicated population. The standard practice of generalizing scientific conclusions is challenged by the demand for personalized medicine. In the United States, traditional minority populations are growing rapidly and are expected to become the majority, which will impact commercialization of marketed products. And their recognition of the need to develop drugs with all patients in mind as a matter of social responsibility. FDA does not make explicit recommendations on the categories to use when collecting and reporting the data. Minority populations generally remain underrepresented in clinical trial populations. The topic session will provide insights on what institutional review boards, or IRBs, consider to be appropriate and allowable reimbursement and compensation practices for trial patients. It will provide guidance on how to reimburse or compensate clinical trial patients while reducing the risk of coercion. This content for sponsor resources is responsible for supporting clinical trial execution, such as management teams, clinical operations, protocol and site managers, and those overseeing reimbursement and compensation. These better practices, we interviewed several central IRB and members or administrators of large academic center IRBs, as well as a sponsor company implementing a pilot program in structured reimbursement and compensation. In asked a series of questions related to existing policies or guidelines for reimbursement and compensation, ways and methods for payment, actions of sponsors and investigational study staff where reimbursement and/or compensation is concerned. The views were analyzed and collated according to emerging themes, making up what is considered by the Clinical Trial Diversification Workstream to be better practice when considering patient reimbursement or compensation for clinical trials conducted in the United States. Highlights when considering reimbursement or compensation for clinical trial participation are as follows. Some form or compensation is encouraged, but not required. Reimbursement or compensation should be applied equally to all study patients. Cut on level of risk is discouraged or disallowed. X methods, such as third-party debit cards, are encouraged, but patients should have the ability to opt for direct payment. In a specific informed consent language should be provided to potential clinical trial patients regarding reimbursement and/or compensation specifics at the time of consent and is outlined here. There was no guidance available from those interviewed with regard to the impact of clinical trial participation on Social Security payment. To recognize that reimbursement is different to compensation, and each has their own definition regarding acceptable practice. Reimburse payment for actual expenses incurred. This is to travel and meal costs for attending study visits. Amount typically capped for specific travel methods, so public transportation or mileage for use of a personal vehicle. Expected travel costs should be determined at the study budget stage with estimates for number of patients expected at each site. Also, reimbursement may be made directly to clinical trial patients through a third-party vendor, taking the site of responsibility for budgeting with sponsors and making to patients. Payment for time required to participate in the study. Compensation should be paid according to predetermined hourly or per procedure rates. For example, it is estimated that a study visit will take approximately 6 hours. At $8 per hour, any patient would receive $120 for that study visit, regardless of any variation per patient, as it is predetermined and each patient receives the same amount. Alternatively, one should determine a rate menu for specific procedures, such as $100 for PK series, $20 for each study visit diary completion, or $40 per blood draw. Not compensating for screening increases the chances of enrolling patients who are truly interested in participating, and you compensate actual study patients. Provides guidance for IRBs and clinical investigators for payment to research subjects. It recognizes that it is not uncommon for subjects to be paid for their participation in research. This is not considered benefit, but rather a recruitment incentive. It is recognized by the FDA that financial incentives are often used when health benefits to subjects are unknown or non-existent. Amounts of payments for reimbursement and/or compensation should be presented to the IRB at the time of review. Payment should not be contingent upon completion of the entire study, but by study visit or at the time of major study visit. Small proportionate incentives for completion of the study are acceptable. Reference links throughout these slides. For more information, please contact me via email or access the Transcelerate website. Thank you for this session on better practices for patient reimbursement.